Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on whether the CI function will be completely replaced by AI in the future. This webinar is hosted by Commentelli, which is a leading provider of market and competitive intelligence solutions. With a global reach, Commentelli empowers organizations to transform data into valuable insights, enabling them to make informed and improved decisions. The webinar today will be led by Christian Bierser, the CEO of Commentelli, and Derek Johnson, CEO of Aurora.
Thank you so much, Maleka, for that introduction. Yes, I am the CEO of Commentelli Inc. I've been with the company for a fair number of years now, and basically been doing CI work in one shape or form ever since I graduated. So it's been a very, very interesting. It's been very interesting to see how the field has developed. And one of the persons that kind of been there all along is the guy next to me on the screen, Derek, a good friend from Aurora. You want to give a little bit of an introduction to you, Derek,
Sure.
as well?
I'd be happy to, Christian. It's always fun to tag team these types of topics and webinars together. Thank you for asking me to do this today. Usually you call me John Malkovich, my Hollywood doppelganger. So we'll address that, put that out in the open to get started. The reason why we're together today is we go back to Skip's Scottsdale conference here about 6 weeks ago, and we obviously, actually it wasn't even that long ago, 3 or 4 something weeks ago.
Yeah, time flies.
We got to talking about this topic of, will AI ever legitimately replace a competitive intelligence function? And it's one near and dear to me. Obviously I've been doing what I've been doing around the same amount of time that you have. I joined Aurora, my brother Eric, back in 2003, and a lot has changed in the last 20 plus years, obviously. And even as you look at the landscape of AI, a lot has changed even in the last 6 to 12 months, right? And we're looking forward to today's conversation just to kind of break down, what role will AI have to play inside of a great competitive intelligence operation, and looking forward to jamming on this with you today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. We've had some really good discussions on this, like you said, in Scottsdale, but we actually talked to quite an extent about AI already in a webinar we did together about 2 years ago. And I think that what would be interesting is to look a little, take a look back and see what did we see during that webinar. And we pulled up two images and slides, or condensed 2 slides into 1 slide here. From that webinar. That webinar was more than AI. It was more. It had a broader focus, but AI was definitely a part of it. So, in that sense, what we kind of did first was to talk about what is a CI system and what that is, and we got now both Forrester and Gartner defining the space of competitive intelligence systems and the industry that now is. So it's getting a bit established. But I just thought we could just recapitulate a little bit about what that is, what a complete CI system is, and that will make it a little bit easier also to relate to what AI can bring to the table for this for these type of platforms. And looking at it, the kind of a general idea of what a CI system is that it has kind of 4 different parts. You can define this a little bit differently if you want to, but it has to be able to monitor your media, or basically anything that flows around out there. And then it has to have the ability to manage not only that kind of input, but also the input that comes from internal sources, basically creating that organization and management of the information that we need to create insights and to work on that. Which brings us to the other 2 parts on the right there, the trend radar, the ability basically to find different patterns, to find things in large data sets that previously was kind of hard to discover by doing manual work. And out of that, we should have some sort of insight generation. So automation here is a key point. We're going to come back to that, of course, but that is kind of the overall, the broad view of a complete CI system. Derek, anything you want to kind of change in the model that we discussed last time 2 years ago, or are we good with working on this today as well?
I really like these 4 components, and again, that was a Mythbusters style session that we did in May of 2021 together as part of it was one webinar as part of a 3-part series, actually moderated at the time by the CEO of Skip, Cam Mackey.
Yeah.
And as I look at this model, Christian, the 4 parts, I would argue that there is both a human element and a technological element to at least 2 of these, if not all 4. So when I say at least 2, I'm looking specifically at intelligence management. I might even extend that to be intelligence program management, and insight generation. I would extend that to be insight generation and delivery. There has to be a human element to those 2 components in particular, or I believe that you're going to have a very short run with your competitive intelligence, program overall, and your system that is there as the underlying sort of bottom-up componentry of your program itself. In my night job in 2023, when I'm not, wearing the hat of the role I play here at Aurora, I am a volunteer within what's known as the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows and president this year, and had an opportunity about a month ago to interview one of the fathers of the field of competitive intelligence. His name is Jan Herring. And what Jan shared with me, and this recording is actually going to be available to the broader community starting next week. He talked about, if your program is only bottom up, it's going to be akin to trying to grow grass in a parking lot. And he went then to the other direction of top down, what I would characterize more from the lens of human intelligence based activities supporting your CI operation and function. Top down would be, much more regular interaction with leadership. David and Jesper talked about that a week ago. Being able to get out in front and do some shadow teaming, some scenario planning, war gaming, and a whole mixture of other intelligence activities that sort of take that kind of top-down viewpoint. But in the absence of technology, really scalable technology that has some AI components factored into it, I don't know that you can have a complete competitive intelligence function without both. And that's why I specifically think that second and the 4th items on that far left image do have a really heavy requirement of human intelligence to them.
Yeah. No. I would definitely agree, and it's interesting also because we asked the audience back then a little bit where they found AI to have a significant role in our field, and they kind of echoed a little bit of what you're saying, but maybe they came at it from the other way. And if we look at the other part here, if we look at the little the pyramids, we found or we defined a little bit the kind of CI work broadly into 2 categories, like grunt work and great work. And the grunt work, everyone knows this, right? I mean, that is the tedious thing of doing the organizing, finding, retrieving, monitoring, manage getting all that you really, really need. You really need it, but it is also time-consuming tasks often to get that straight and in order. And the audience back then kind of also with the we did these kind of the polls, the Menti polls, quickly identify that this is actually a good place for AI to be, to help out with this, to do these kind of things, and take some of that heavy lifting away from the work day of the analyst, basically. But then we also found that it actually back then also was recognized to be able to do a little bit more of what we call great work, acting as an analytical support tool. We talk about this visualizing trends, helping scanning large parts of large data sets to see if something has of interest has occurred, et cetera, et cetera. So we're kind of touching a little bit back then on the abilities of AI also in the more great workspace that we kind of define the top of the pyramid. But the grunt workspace, I think everyone was in agreement that that's a good place to have to unleash the AI to help out, basically. So question now, when we are 2 years ahead of that webinar, or 2 years have passed, a lot of things have happened, wouldn't you say, Derek?
A lot of things have happened, for sure. And I would even go so far as to say that analytical support of the AI and technology overall, I spin the definition of AI, and you'll see this, folks, come out here in a couple more slides, to be something other than just solely seeing it through the lens of artificial intelligence. I'm gonna use the term augmented intelligence here in a little bit, but leaning into that analytical support, trend identification, visualization, scanning, et cetera. Obviously, we're 2 years removed from when this first came up, and I think that I might even argue that it's probably time to call at least 1 or 2, if not all 3 of those subcomponents under analytical support, move them to the left and down and get them a little bit more into sort of the standard for what AI would be. Because if you can successfully do that, I believe you have an opportunity to create scale for your competitive intelligence function, which we all know scale in that regard is going to allow you to serve more internal customers, more stakeholders, and to move the program forward in a way that, if one group of your stakeholders or champions were to leave the organization or become victim to the next layoff caused by a recession, you're going to have a more diversified approach for your internal stakeholders and a greater chance to survive.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that, and I like the idea of maybe certain things nowadays aren't great work anymore. We're seeing a transfer of certain things are becoming more grunt worky type of things. That's a good idea.
And they're probably that great work from the AI's point of view is probably there's some other things that are moving in there, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time to fast forward to the next slide and see where we are now. So I asked we call this slide the year of ChatGPT. It's not completely correct because the big launch was last year, but it was late last year. So the impact this has had has been kind of tremendous, and sipping through all these articles about the possibilities, and of course experience in working with AI myself, I kind of thought about what are we going to put up here, and then should I have a couple of articles that I really like about it, or should I do this? I'll let ChatGPT praise itself, which is kind of fun. This is a couple of seconds for the AI to find, to basically come up with titles and excerpts for 4 articles that don't exist, but why it is so great. And it is impressive. It is tremendously impressive that it actually can come up with these suggestions of praising itself in such a short term, and making it so appealing. And this illustrates how powerful the technology is that we're looking at here. This could have been written by a human, no doubt about that. It shows a diversity of areas to express itself in, and it is basically very impressive. So this is kind of what we are looking at, that are going to be introduced into the intelligence community. This kind of tools that have this ability to communicate in a human-like fashion. And it's also a question that this is also what your stakeholders are going to see. This is also what your stakeholders are going to start expecting to see from systems. And that's a fantastic development, right, Derek? It's all there's this expression that is all fun and games until someone ends up in a cone. If you're a dog owner, you know that expression, and I think we got the cone a week or a couple of weeks ago, right? Or one of the cones came and strapped itself around our head. You want to talk a little bit about that, Derek? Maybe.
Yeah, you may know more about that specific incident than I do, but I'll introduce it. How about that? So, I'm a dog owner. I've had dogs that have been in the literal, not just the proverbial cone, and it's always entertaining to kind of watch their reactions to that. So
then you should see a cat in a cone. That
cat
you
in a
don't
cone.
want to see.
Well, when I think about ChatGPT, and I had to do a little education of my own even yesterday about this. So generative pre-trained transformer is what it stands for. When you're thinking about that opportunity for an AI to generate based upon pre-trained content, things that might transform your way of thinking about a certain topic. So this is Derek's interpretation of what GPT might stand for. You have that opportunity to do some things that are really productive, like I don't know, get some ideas for the way you might get started or get past a certain writer's block if you're putting together a profile for a stakeholder, or other things. And then you have some things that are frankly going to get you into pretty risky deep water potential that you ought to avoid, particularly as a well-trained competitive intelligence analyst. And a few weeks ago, we saw a global technology company. So this isn't a micro cap pharmaceutical company or healthcare company. This is a global technology company. Witness that situation where a staffer took some sensitive information about their organization and plugged it into either ChatGPT, or I think it was ChatGPT, and that turned into this huge data leak for Samsung. Not just some little company down the street that nobody's heard of. This is Samsung we're talking about. So, Christian, when you look at this incident and what it may mean for companies of all shapes and sizes, industries, verticals, sizes of organization, where do you think this kind of sets a precedent, if you will, for internal staff members to use generative pre-trained transformers to help set everything from tactics to operations to strategies?
So here's the thing about this one, and I think this one was kind of expected. It was a little bit, maybe it was surprising that you say it was a company like Samsung. I think that this is something that's happened in many more companies. And I know it has, and there's been some other things coming out as well. But I think Samsung, being the kind of company it is, it's also kind of baffling that you would think that this could happen. What it was basically was that certain code was put into ChatGPT, not in a sort of in a malicious way. This is quite a common way that programmers work to optimize their code. They put it in there to see, can we write this a little bit better? Can we do this? Can I get some help from the AI to optimize what I'm doing? And the problem is, of course, is that this code then goes from Samsung out into ChatGPT. So it kind of goes into an open space or an unknown space for Samsung in this case, which means that it also, of course, is then being used by the algorithms to improve themselves. So there's a kind of definitely what you would call a massive security breach. And definitely a damper on the technology, or sort of not the technology itself, because actually the AI hasn't done anything really wrong. It's actually performing what it should do, and probably helps these coders a lot with their work. But it's the effects of this, the unwanted effects that we're seeing. And I think that again, I like the cone thing. You have this you're running around in the field, you're happy, you're a dog, everything is great, and then suddenly you run into something, and then everything becomes gloomy, and I can't do this anymore. I got a cone on my head. So we've been running pretty fast these last sort of 6 months with this, and my main concern is that in the CI space, that from technology companies in the CI space, we have to be very careful with what we are offering our customers. And there are ways to do this without to sort of enjoy the greatness of the technology without putting yourself into harm's way, like happened with Samsung in this case. So this is. But it's also so easy to go this route, the sloppy route, basically, and do integrations in your systems that are basically unsecure, and that is, I think, something that CI professionals really need to take at heart. And this is also, unfortunately, a situation where you might need to curb the enthusiasm of some of your colleagues in your companies. That oh yeah, this is great, but let's not put our entire company in a cone, kind of thing.
Wasn't that the name of a television program once upon a time, Christian? Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yes, I cannot
right?
really, I can't really take credit for that one. I think that's Larry, what's his name? I don't, I always forget his last name, but it's such a boring thing to have to do sometimes to bring that up. But I do want to say another thing. It's when we bring these sort of caveats into it, and we are curbing people's enthusiasm about technology, we must look to ourselves and make sure why we are doing it. Is it a pure defensive move to protect my position because I'm scared of this technology and I basically just want to try to keep it away from me and keep it away from my company? That's not, I think, the valid, then it's not valid criticism. Then you have another problem. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but be aware of it. I mean, still understand that there's some tremendous opportunities here. I'm looking at the thing on the left side, which was actually impressively performed by the AI. And this just is a fraction of what it can do, to then the problems that we are seeing here. So we don't want to throw out the baby with the baby water just because there is a irresponsible way of doing it, and we still need to make sure that we relate to this, and because it's going to affect us. I'm really curious to see what you have to say about something that we call the frictionless monster. From our discussions here. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the risk of being replaced by maybe that frictionless monster. And we'll round off with talking about how we can actually maybe ride that frictionless monster and make it work for us.
So I want you to raise your hand. I can't see you raise your hands, but I want you to raise your hand if you take comfort, if you find it comfortable to have friction with either in your personal or professional endeavors. Do you find it comfortable to have friction with those people around you, whether it be your spouse, your children, your stakeholder at work, whomever? I would never have raised my hand prior to about a year ago on that question. I'm a lover, not necessarily a fighter. I like to see people get along, but maybe it's just me getting older. There is opportunity to grow in the presence of friction. And I've been heavily influenced by something that I've never played hockey, but I took in a master class by Wayne Gretzky a couple months ago. And he says it this way. He says, you will never truly grow, unless you put yourself in a position, a placement on the ice where you're going to get punished. And, punished isn't, like having your phone taken away or being grounded, like we might have been, Christian, as young boys by our parents once upon a time. But punished means I'm going to get beat up a little bit because I'm putting myself into that portion of the ice where I'm going to invite some skepticism about my ideas. I'm going to invite criticism about, recommendation I'm making as a competitive intelligence analyst to my organization that they need to really kind of wake up and smell what's happening around you. And this is where I think that, kind of going back to what I said earlier about both a top-down and a bottom-up approach to the way in which you organize your competitive intelligence efforts, there's something to that, I believe, and it is predicated on the degree of friction that these various intelligence activities might have, both for you and as you interact with your stakeholders internal to your company. I did something interesting, kind of like what you did. I couldn't find, when I plugged in a frictionless monster to Chat GPT yesterday, it actually brought up the Loch Ness monster, believe it or not. And I learned about the Loch Ness monster years ago, but I didn't find that particularly entertaining for today's webinar. But I changed that slightly, and I typed in, what is a frictionless experience? And Chat GPT, I'm just going to read this to you, says a frictionless experience refers to a seamless and effortless interaction or process that is free from obstacles, difficulties, or unnecessary complications. It typically applies to various domains, including technology, customer service, user interfaces, and product design. In a frictionless experience, the user or customer can effortlessly achieve their goals or complete a task without encountering any unnecessary hurdles or frustrations. It emphasizes the removal of any barriers, simplification of processes, and optimization of interactions to provide a smooth and efficient journey. Doesn't that sound lovely?
That sounds perfect for CI, right?
Isn't that what every CI analyst is there for?
Exactly.
So then on the other end of that spectrum, I think of somebody maybe modeling out what a devil's advocate would look like. So I typed in, what is a devil's advocate, to ChatGPT, and it says, a devil's advocate is a person who takes a contrary or opposing position in a debate or discussion, often for the purpose of challenging prevailing opinions or assumptions. In a broader sense, being a devil's advocate means presenting arguments or viewpoints that challenge the majority opinion or consensus, even if one does not personally hold those views. The goal is not necessarily to convince others of the opposing viewpoint, but rather to stimulate critical thinking, uncover flaws or weaknesses in arguments, and ensure that all perspectives are thoroughly examined. David Kalinowski, a week ago on this webinar series that Commentelli is hosting, talked about if you're going to take away one word, he said the word should be perspective. And I think that that's what every great competitive intelligence analyst, manager, director, group overall, that's the value that they bring to the organization. Now, going back to this top-down, bottom-up approach, you can't have an effective, sustainable, I even use the word durable, one that's going to survive a recession, which I'm going to just put it on the table. I think we're in one. I think there's far too many people afraid to call it what it is. And we're dancing around this topic of a recession. And I think that competitive intelligence really has that opportunity to be the group in the room who helps stakeholders, leadership, see through the lens of opposing viewpoints, all the arguments, all the perspectives that are required to build a durable, sustainable organization. That, to me, is what competitive intelligence is all about. Now, you can look at the friction meter at the top of this. As you move left to right, there's friction moments that you're going to have with both human-focused efforts and AI or technology-focused efforts converging on this middle part. I didn't put them on this slide, but I'll give you a few examples of what I mean. Building a competitive profile is a look at that moment in time, and usually it goes back into what that organization has done in the past with some forward-looking expectation of what they might do in the future. I would call that a combination, if it's done appropriately, of both an AI and technology-driven, scale the operation type of exercise, along with some type of human involvement to make that profile, use the word actionable, but there's going to be different degrees of actionability along this metric. So you start with competitive profiles, you might move to the right, a little more friction might be inherent in something like, how would a battle card be prepared that's going to actually get into some edgier topics like pricing and discounting strategies and other things that are not necessarily going to be discoverable out there through automated efforts. They're going to require some human intervention paired with, using an AI or technological application to help to scale against dozens, if not hundreds of competitors that most organizations cope with today. Moving all the way then to the right, you're going to start to see things like shadow teaming, competitive simulations, and wargaming, those types of activities that are going to require put yourself in that place on the ice where there's a high amount of friction, the opportunity to get punished a little bit by a leader. Now, obviously, you can't piss people off, as David said last week, but you have this opportunity to really kind of lean into, let me embrace some friction with my stakeholders, both from a human and technological viewpoint. That's where I think competitive intelligence has a greater shot of being durable, sustainable over a longer period of time. What do you think?
I fully agree there, Derek. And speaking about, when we talk about kind of the frictionless monster, I think this has a lot to do with confirming your views and confirming your bias. Going back to that devil's advocate and that frictionless process. It's fully possible for me to ask ChatGPT, or let me give you an example back in the day from one of my previous positions and when working CI, when working for a central CI unit in a company, we were tasked with defining a market. But the way we should define the market was to ensure that the company that I worked with turned out to be the major player in that market. Now, the value of that, of course, is limited. It doesn't change the world, but it gives a confirmation, in this case to management, that they're doing great, that they're number one player in that market. Now, that question, if I were to put that to, for example, ChatGPT, it would comply and help me with that, with no questions asked. That will be a frictionless action for me to do. And I can do this. If I want to continue this path, I can continue to do those kind of things. Same thing, I can tell the AI that certain material that certain information is really great. You know, when you do, I like this. When you go in and you want to, I like this movie. I want more movies like this, more movies like, until the end, the only thing I get is Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, but maybe I should watch something else to become a more of a better person. So the frictionlessness in this is, I think, a danger that is lurking behind what we saw with Samsung. That was kind of an open leak. The frictionless here is that you can create a world for yourself, if you're not careful, that will confirm everything that you do and make you the greatest person on earth, until reality hits you and probably puts you in a cone. So that's where I see this kind of can turn into a monster if we're not careful.
I would only add that, if all you're looking for your AI to do is be affirmatory, it's kind of like being, my mom, rest her soul, had hospice care back in the fall of 2001. I call that palliative care. Their only purpose in life is to be there to help you feel more comfortable as you're dying, right? So that's not the role of competitive intelligence. CI is supposed to be edgy and bring perspective. And if your goal in life is to be palliative to your stakeholders, your AI can do that. And I would argue, I think your argument here, Christian, is that you need to tune the AI to not be affirmatory or create these frictionless experiences that we talk about. It's to have it be coded and tuned and learn it in such a way, pre-trained, if you will, to create some friction and along with human intelligence, move to the right on this grid as much as it can.
Yeah, and I think that's a good summarization, and definitely, I mean, understanding it, and we'll get back to that and see how it works and understand what the dangers are, and know yourself, have some self understanding of what you're doing. But now we're kind of talking about things that, again, we're talking about that the dangers. You should probably be careful about this. But and it kind of feels a little bit warm and fuzzy because we all understand this. It couldn't replace me. It couldn't replace me as an analyst because of all these things that Derek and Christian are saying, that it could be dangerous, it could be biased, it could be all of those things. But I will say that on the other hand, yeah, AI will take your job. It will, but depending on how you are actually doing your job today. So let's take a look at. And because I think that it goes back to what you talk about friction and where you put yourself, where you put your CI initiative, where you put that into the organizational place and how you perform it and what kind of frictions you're getting. I think that if you and this is, I mean, we should be very aware that there are kind of certain circumstances that you might be you might be in danger of being replaced by an AI-driven tool, and it has a lot to do, like I said, what are you contributing to the company, or what kind of frictions are you creating, what kind of deliverables are there. And I want to raise 3 points here that I think are clear danger signs. The first one is, of course, the unclear purpose of you're doing. Without kind of guidance, without that planning that you talked about, without that initiative, if that is kind of a little bit fussy, what are you supposed to be doing? Who are you supposed to, who are you reporting? I mean, all of those kind of things, we know if that becomes too ambiguous, it is not a good position to be in from the start. So that's kind of a weak situation for the CI team. Another thing that I put in here is what I call a heavy focus on research. And note, I put research in quotation marks, because there's research and then there's research. For example, if there's if you're doing the kind of research that is basically answering questions like, well, where can I find a good report on this? That's in maybe some way you can define it as research. And if you keep getting those kind of questions, instead of getting questions more about how will the market transform, or how will, if you're seeking your opinion on something, as opposed to finding something for someone. That is, and then of course research can be done through the CI department, and that's another type of research. We need to understand this. We do research on it, but not just getting stick fetching, basically get me a report on this that's already out there. So that's, I think is also a very a danger sign, or you're in the danger, you're moving towards the danger zone, if that takes up a large part of your daily work. And the third one is the aggregation of content without adding any value to it. So, and this is when a lot of times you produce newsletters in organizations. CI team will produce a newsletter on certain things. These are often very, very appreciated pieces of information, but you got to be careful here, because what is it that you're doing besides aggregating the top most important things and sending them out? Are you contributing with more on this, like explaining why is this important? Are you adding some analysis to it, explaining why this is important? Are you creating some friction here? This is a place where you can introduce those kind of things that you talked about, being the devil's advocate, doing those. This is another perspective on what we are doing. So making that, because if you're not doing that, if you're just compiling, and there's nothing to say that the AI couldn't produce something that is similar to what you do, at least in the eyes of your stakeholders, by just saying, select this week's top articles within this certain field and give it to me every Friday, without any other sort of intervention. So if you are in this kind of spot, and that's kind of, this takes up, first of all, you have that unclear purpose from an organizational standpoint, and you're kind of focused around these other two things. There is an argument for the AI here. Definitely, it could. Maybe it could, at least there's an argument from a stakeholder position. Why shouldn't we go with an AI in this situation, when all you do is basically help me find information that someone else wrote and compiling information that someone else wrote as well? So what do you think about, Derek? Is that a situation you would like to be in a company and running that kind of CI program?
I wouldn't like to be in that situation, no. And I would argue that if that's all you're doing, calling it a competitive intelligence function is misleading at best, and maybe terms I won't share out in the open. Is what my real opinion would be. I think that this goes a little deeper, Christian. So, unclear purpose would be you don't have multiple champions at different points in the organization. In other words, if sales leadership, this is where the popularity of sales enablement has become so rampant in our space of late. And it's not that it's wrong to do that. That's one component of a good intelligence operation, is supporting tactical revenue generative activities, right? But if that's all you're doing, or if that's all you aspire to do, you know, I think that I break it down into a situation where you have an opportunity as an intelligence analyst to help your organization create strategies, and strategies are those responses to strategic circumstances. So recession readiness might be a good example. How and what specifically are you doing as an analyst to help your organization be better prepared for, you know, that I'm going to call it inevitability once people start using the term, right? So, you know, this heavy focus on research, you know, I would go a step further and say, like, take the role that AI might play in earnings coverage. So if you're a public company competing against other public companies, I think you have an opportunity to point an AI at earnings announcements, and there's going to be, you know, some scale that's created as a result of that. But what the AI won't tell you is that opportunity to dig really deep into the outcomes of that earnings announcement for competitor X, and you might learn that, you know, their EBITDA is declining, but it's because they're placing a huge emphasis on reinvestment in the business, and they're building the plant in XYZ country to potentially start a product line that does A, B, and C, right? That's where you're saying that the term research has multiple definitions.
Yes.
And as a CI analyst, you have to get really right with the fact that, you know, what is your reality, you know, and where is it? And then that third point around not adding value, some of that has to do with, you know, the friction that you're willing to take on. You know, are you willing to put yourself out there, put yourself, you know, to that part of the proverbial ice where you might get punished? Unless you're willing to do that, I don't know that you can stake a claim toward having a durable, sustainable CI operation. And yeah, it's going to put you in that danger zone. I'm hearing Top Gun in the back of my head. You know, with that movie that came out, what was it, last summer?
Yeah.
You're gonna have some difficult times ahead of you if that's all you're doing is these three things.
Yeah. And I think that's a hard question that we all got to sort of put to ourselves. Where am I in this danger zone? And if I'm not, or if I am, how do I get out? Basically, because, and I think you mentioned a couple of things, and I think that we're the best way, I think, to move at this point is not to deny the capabilities or the usefulness of artificial intelligence. Or definitely not become one of the replaceables or move into that danger zone. What you need to do is to become sort of that augmented analyst, where AI is kind of an enabler for your success. And again, I think there are three kind of easy and kind of obvious things that you got to do. And first, you got to control that frictionless monster. I mean, you mentioned very well there, Derek, about how that can happen. When we talked about how it can confirm. But if you know this and you know how to act on it, like you said, make sure how to tweak it. And it doesn't have to be so much. I mean, it could be just in the way you're asking the questions. I mean, we are CI professionals. We know how to ask questions, and we know how to ensure that we are not getting too biased. I mean, you're always going to be biased, but we're not going to. We can apply that kind of tactics again when we work with a frictionless monster here. But when we control it, I mean, understanding its strengths, understanding its weaknesses, we talked a lot about the weaknesses, and then get to understand the strengths here as well. That is key. So you got to embrace the technology. You got to understand it. You got to see how it works. You got to you got to see how those mechanisms are able to serve you. And when you do that, then you put that to work, and you can work it hard. I mean, that's kind of the point we talked about. Again, all of those heavy lifting parts, they're still there. We might, like you said, Derek, we might expand those heavy lifting and turning to certain other things that now become more standardized. That's not a threat. That's, again, an opportunity to work with the system and allow you to put yourself in more friction, in more situations with more frictions, because you have a system that backs up all of that heavy lifting. You got the time to do more things. You got to do that. Kind of send it into the mines, find the ore, bring back the nuggets. That's kind of and repeat and repeat and repeat all over again. And then focus on the craft, like you said multiple times there, Derek, about what we need to do and how we need to act as a CI unit or a CI professional. Get out of that danger zone. If you're in the danger zone, you're not doing CI. But all of those things that are performed in the danger zone, kind of say they need to be done, but they don't necessarily need to be done by you. They can be done by the frictionless, not in this case monster maybe, but the we have to give it a good name when it's on the good side. So we'll find something out. But that's how you use it. But don't be engaged in that situation. Focus on the craft. Create the artwork. Take those nuggets and produce necklaces. That's kind of where you got to be. So that's kind of, I think, a way forward here, and I'm really curious to hear your final thoughts on this one, Derek, as well.
Yeah, my brother and I are working on a book right now that brings together the mindsets related to being both missionary in our focus and mercenary in our application. So this book, we hope, might be out by the end of the year, but basically it's a combination of like, imagine Brene Brown met Kobe Bryant, who's over my shoulder here.
You got to get that book.
The Mamba mentality is all about putting yourself in those positions where you can be the best version of yourself. Do the training, do the stakeholder interaction, do all the stuff that will give you the greatest opportunity for success. Now, there's bad things happen to good people, right? Yeah. Recessions have taken out entire competitive intelligence functions, and there's not a darn thing we can do about it other than put all the tools in place, put your human elements in place. And if you do that successfully, you might have a bad thing occur to you at some point in time, but you'll have a lot of attractive characteristics and qualities that you can take to a different organization. I've been heavily influenced over the years by a good friend of mine in our space. His name's Tim Stone. He doesn't pop up much anymore. He's in his mid to late 70s. And he tells me, unless you're every day finding some stakeholder to have a actual conversation with, challenging their assumptions, hearing them out, creating this kind of two-part discussion around what competitive intelligence really means to your organization, you're not practicing CI. And I believe in that a lot. And I don't think that in the absence of it, you are going to have a really hard time maintaining, developing, and building a future of perspective for your organization to serve as that devil's advocate that I talked about earlier. My brother would say, I promised him I would get this plug in, not for the book, but for these two things. These are two things that an AI cannot be or cannot represent. An AI cannot show the sense of hope for the future because it can't imagine improvement of personal circumstances. And secondly, an AI cannot help us deal with choice, starting with sacrifice, since it really has no sense of aesthetics. What's beautiful to my organization might be different than what's beautiful to this organization over here. Some companies who might be more manufacturing excellence focused are not going to be quite as focused maybe on the role that sales enablement within an Intel operation might play, right? So all that leads to choice being the heart, hope being kind of the soul. There has to be that human element to this, or you're going to have I think a fairly short run of it. Again, kind of going back to that top-down, bottom-up capability. If anybody wants to talk more about it, I'm pretty easy to find out there. Always happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. That's some great last words.
For any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us using the email addresses displayed on the screen.